Censorship is defined in the Literacy Dictionary as any attempt to limit access to ideas or to limit the opportunity for others to read certain books or to consume any other media. This concept of restricting information that is deemed unsuitable for whatever reason goes back for thousands of years. From the time of Socrates, various people and organizations have attempted to control the public's access to ideas and information. One might think that in this age of information overload, censorship would no longer be an issue. They would be wrong. All over the country, books are being banned from American schools by parents and organizations who disagree with their content. According to statistics produced by the American Library Association, over 326 books were challenged or removed in 2016 due to accusations of swearing, immorality, or other concerns. And these are only those that were reported. Although many of these novels do contain arguably controversial content, examining morally ambiguous topics and the consequent development of opinions about those topics is a fundamental part of adolescents' personal development. There have been numerous situations where teachers have been fired over issues of censorship, like Sissy Lax, Marion Goldwasser, and James Moffat. It is an inconvenient truth that restricting books and intimidating high school teachers into choosing bland but politically correct texts over masterful works of literature is a real problem with serious consequences. Those in favor of censorship in the high school classroom might have you believe that they only want to get rid of books that are inappropriate and would leave the rest alone. However, novels like The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, and Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, which have all been subject to multiple ban attempts, are listed as 2nd, 4th, and 11th respectively in the ranking of the top 100 novels of the 20th century. In fact, of the 100 books on that list, 46 of them have been subject to numerous ban attempts. Dr. Ken Donaldson, a professor at Arizona State University, provides an excellent reason for the controversial content in literature. He says, quote, "The value of literature is the search for truth and the assessment of truths proposed by many writers, past and present. That in so searching, much truth is found to be unpleasant reveals nothing of the degradation of literature, but much about the nature and state of our world. Students live with man, not the angels, and literature tells us about man's relations with each other," unquote. So, just because a book touches on controversial topics, that does not negate its literary value. In fact, according to several experts in the fields of English and adolescent psychology, discussing real-life topics and ethical dilemmas is highly beneficial and nigh essential to an adolescent's moral development. Peter Scharf, a professor at the LSU School of Public Health and the Institute for Public Health and Justice, wrote an article entitled Moral Development and the Literary Interests of Adolescent Readers. It explains how literature can help adolescents to develop their moral identities. Professor Scharf states that there are 3 types of literature that appeal to adolescents at different stages of development. The first is literature of social expectation. Throughout adolescence, kids are trying to figure out who they are and what they want. They do this by examining their immediate environment and their fundamental values. They ask themselves, what does this society expect from me? Reading literature that addresses social expectation presents established value systems that an adolescent reader can compare the values of his own society against. The next category is literature of social revolt. As they progress, adolescents reject social conventions, moral rules, and beliefs. Literature with themes of ethical revolution, where characters revolt against injustices around them in the name of good and truth, can appeal to them at this stage. Scharf notes that this process can seem threatening to parents and other adults, but this rejection of conventional values is an unavoidable stage of development. The third and last category is literature of affirmation, which explores themes of universal truth. According to Dr. Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of development, after the rejection of social morals, adolescents search for a universal moral and metaphysical meaning, which is to say the fundamental nature of life. This is a common theme in great literature, making it an important resource to adolescents at this stage. It encourages adolescent readers to find universal truths that appeal to them, independent of what anyone else believes, upon which they can develop personal values that they can rely upon as adults. Dr. Donaldson offers a more poetic summary of the effects that truly masterful writing has on its readers. He says, quote, With great literature, and that is what we hope to lead our students to, we become a part of the book, but the book becomes a part of us, a part to aid us in living, to make us more compassionate, to make us more aware of the nuances of life, unquote. According to Professor Donaldson, the urge to censor traces back primarily from anxiety over the world drifting farther and farther away from traditional morals and values. Literature is often a window by which we examine our world as it really is. Many want to protect their children from the truly terrible things that exist in the modern world, which is an admirable goal. As said by Nancy Spaulding, the library and media supervisor of Round Rock, Texas, quote, "I celebrate those parents who are monitoring their children's consumption of media. Too often, I have parents who monitor nothing." Unquote. However, it seems that many parents don't realize that their children are already surrounded by sex, bad language, violence, war, sexism, drugs, and alcohol, and many other unfortunate facets of society. Modern media culture has ensured that through TV, movies, and advertising, and of course the internet, today's children have seen it all. Colin Brzezicki, a professor of English and drama at Ridley College, sums up the situation in his paper called "The Elephant in the Classroom." He says, quote, "We say we want to protect them from crossing a line when they are already on the other side of it. And so they stand there in the chaotic maelstrom of their own experience and look back at us, teachers and parents, guarding the now vacant zone of innocence and rewriting the classics because they use words that offend. We substitute vacuumed books, simplistic slogans, wellness literature, mind-numbing life lessons, and a pair of blinkers. And we wonder why they are confused and sometimes angered by our naivety." Close quote. It is a given that it is one of the most important jobs a parent has to protect their children. However, many parents interpret the implications of this responsibility in vastly different ways. They believe that shielding children from harsh realities and harmful behaviors is the best way to raise their kids. But all that does is make them totally unprepared to encounter these unfortunate but very real facets of life that can have devastating effects if not handled properly. This can be likened to the debate on vaccinations. Parents refuse to vaccinate, wishing to save their child pain and figmental ill effects from the vaccine, and in so doing, leave their children vulnerable to authentically deadly diseases. Open discussion and forewarning are the vaccine that can save your child from being duped into making hasty choices on the spot that could seriously affect their lives. Knowledge truly is power. If one has all the facts, it is exponentially easier to make informed and healthy decisions. Many censoring parents do not truly understand that the purpose of reading great literature, even with the controversial parts, is ultimately to prepare and therefore protect readers. Professor Scharf sums it up excellently, saying that, quote, "In an age of conflict and change, the process of identity search becomes increasingly difficult for many adolescents. The adolescent is told to find meaningful values in a world without order and direction. He is asked to define for himself moral truth in a world that can define none for itself. He is told to find a fulfilling role in a world increasingly impossible to enter. In the process of identity search, books may play a vital role. Through literature, the adolescent is able to anticipate future life dilemmas he will face. For example, the conflicts of love, work, morality, and meaning. He is given a historical and philosophical framework with which to analyze his world," unquote. Many pro-censorship arguments are built upon the idea that these high school students are young children, who indeed should probably not read some of the more adult literature. But the students in question are no longer little children. They are adolescents who are on the brink of adulthood. Parents argue that it's their job to shelter their children, and it is. But today, adolescents are already faced with adult problems, and in literature, they can find guidance and comfort. There is a point where every adolescent will go out into the world as an adult and face life, which studying literature can help them to do. In the 1951 court case, United States Supreme Court, Adler versus Board of Education, where a teacher was wrongly fired for belonging to a non-conventional political party, Justice William O. Douglas said, quote, "Where suspicion fills the air and holds scholars in line for fear of their jobs, there can be no exercise of the free intellect. A problem can no longer be pursued with impunity to its edges. Fear stalks the classroom. The teacher is no longer a stimulant to adventurous thinking. She becomes instead a pipeline for safe and sound information. A deadening dogma takes the place of free inquiry. Instruction tends to become sterile. Pursuit of knowledge is discouraged. Discussion often leaves off where it should begin." Unquote. Censorship has cost several teachers their careers, but more than that, it has made teachers everywhere afraid to teach. They are afraid to use truly great examples of writing to teach from for fear of backlash from parents or administration. So they keep their heads down and stick to the commonly taught texts that are sanitized and safe. Sissy Lax is one of many examples of high school teachers who were fired for letting real life into their classrooms. Lax tells her story in an article called "The Teacher's Nightmare: Getting Fired for Good Teaching." It started with her assigning her class of high school juniors to film videos as a drama exercise, which emphasized authentic voice. They worked independently on their scripts, using street language, and then performed them in front of the students' parents and other members of staff without incident. 3 months passed, and the principal heard about the videos and the language used in them. Ms. Lax was then suspended and fired for violating a minor appendix of a student discipline code, which normally doesn't even apply to teachers, and earns a maximum punishment of 10 days suspension. Mrs. Lax defends her use of the creative writing process with a poem written in her class by a previously disengaged student who, as a part of their poetry unit, wrote this poem, "Alone" by Reginald McNeary. "I'm all alone in the world today. No one to laugh with, no one to play. It's been like this since the age of 3, no one to love, care, or hold me. I guess that's why I'm the way I am. No one loved me, so I don't give a damn. No one to pick me up when I fall. No one to measure growth or how tall. Alone, how it hurts inside. If I were to die, no one would cry. I never gave a damn about any other. I love my shoes more than I love my mother. You might think I'm the devil or call me Satan. I have no love, I'm so full of hatin'. I guess that's why I have low self-esteem. The only time I show love is in my dreams." This kind of raw emotional expression of real pain and experience is exactly the kind of thing that should be happening in America's classrooms. Using words to write about life is what literature is all about, and life is not always pretty. Kids and teachers should be free to express themselves without fear of punishment. Although not everything should be permissible, teachers must be trusted to guide their classes using their own discretion. The solutions to the issue of censorship in the high school classroom that I'm going to propose are based upon the principles of preparedness and professionalism. It is an eventuality that every teacher will experience opposition on reading material at some time in their career. In cases with irrational objectors, the unprepared teacher or administrator might be intimidated by their intensity and fail to stand their ground. That is why the keys to handling these situations are established protocol and open communication. Several different sources recommended protocols that, if followed, could help to solve problems amenably. The Pinellas County School District in Florida, for example, has implemented successful policies in preparation for complaints about class materials that were developed and supported by the whole school board rather than a lone teacher. These policies involve a system of protocols for teachers when selecting books to teach from, and a set of protocols for parents or other parties to file a complaint. When said complaint is being filed, the filer is asked very specifically what they objected to, what negative effects they thought the book would have on the student reader, whether or not they had read the whole text, and it asks them to suggest an alternate selection of comparable literary value and pedagogical function. This way, there is no emotion, no uncertainty, and both parties have a logical guideline with which to handle the problem. In conclusion, political correctness has no place in determining the value of a work, and if America's teachers are bullied into passing over books that have valuable lessons for the sake of social propriety, then we are depriving our children of some of the best examples of the written word that have ever existed, which is an absolute mockery of education. Censoring great literature is sacrificing the sanctity of learning to shield young adults from the very things that make us human and make life meaningful. There may be shocking and offensive parts in some books, but that does not negate their literary value nor the value of the moral education. Professor Peter Scharf considers moral maturity to be essential in today's world. He says that, quote, "Only adults who have reflected upon and developed a clear set of inner values can hope to cope with the flux of the last quarter of the 20th century. In this search for values, books and teachers have a unique task. If they can encourage meaningful personal searches among young people, they can play a vital role in the process of moral development." Unquote. Censorship hinders teachers from completing this important task. Furthermore, it stunts the personal development and growth of students by depriving them of the opportunity for exposure to stimulating questions about the human experience and issues of morality that help them to develop their own beliefs and values. It is my hope that with the appropriate policy and communication between parents and teachers, censorship of valuable literature will be abandoned, and teachers will be free to teach their students to the best of their abilities. Thank you.